Welcome, everybody, to the best and worst performer predictions from the CFF List Duo. I'm Jay Mill. I got my partner, Willie B, as usual. We're here to not only recap some of the performances from week one, but give you our thoughts on the players that you should pay the most attention to in week two, in terms of those we think will have good performances, as well as those we think you should stay away from in week two due to expected bad performances. How you doing, Willie? How's everything? How do you feel about week one?
I'm doing well. Week one, a little up and down. Some guys who came out of nowhere came on strong. Had a couple of losses, but all in all, a good week to start the season.
I agree. I think I'm in 9 leagues this year. Had technically two losses. We split. We went 1-1 in the Kings Classic. We had a decent week one debut. The Kings Classic has expanded to 14 teams. Uh, they took a league vote to see if we should play one or two opponents each week. It turned out people wanted to play two opponents a week so things could balance out, not be so fluky in terms of bad teams, getting lucky and getting a win. Um, you know, Most of the league ended up 1-1. I think there were four undefeated, and there's four with 0-2 records. So we're right there in the middle of the pack. But we made some pickups. We're ready to move on there. Then I lost to Jared in another dynasty league, but otherwise, I think I did very well in my 7 other leagues. So I'm pretty happy about the way the
Yeah.
week went. And I know in our super starters, which is our league that we've started with the expanded rosters. One with 24 owners, another we call the mini super starters with 12. You and I both kind of hit the jackpot with 300-point games in a couple of those leagues. I think our early preseason predictions seem to be on point, and we'll probably start off with that as we recap our best and worst from week one. But before that, do you have anything you wanted to add about kind of the performances and results from week one?
Oh, now talking about the superstars, yeah. I mean, I thought we did hit the jackpot, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I got edged out on some wins with some of these historical type performances that we'll get to here in the future. Unfortunately, I came up against some of these 60-point scores. So
Right, and we did mention it in the waiver watch draft. If you saw that, and if you didn't, this might be new information, but it seemed like an extraordinarily high number of really huge games across the board at all positions. I think we ended up somewhere with about 25 quarterbacks having over 30 points. Uh, Similar number, for running backs and receivers that scored over 25, and even tight ends that scored over 20. So I think that there seemed to be an unusually high number of teams playing FCS schools. I know that is the norm for week one, but it just seemed like every single team had a matchup against an FCS school, which led to a lot of outrageous scoring this weekend. I think you start to see that balance out a little bit this week, but you still got quite a few of those mismatches. But you do see a lot more stiff competition this week, which again, we'll get into. But first, we want to recap our predictions from last week. If you're new to following this show, again, it's we just simply call it the best and worst for the week. Each week, from the top performers lists, we predict who will perform the best and who will perform the worst. If we get the pick correctly, and our person that we predicted to get the best score does do that, we get 3 points. If they're the second best, we get 2 points. If they're the third best, we get 1 point, and vice versa for the worst. If they're the worst, they get 3, second worst 2, third worst they get 1. Anything in between is a 0, but certainly doesn't mean we missed the mark. And I guess right off the bat, starting with the quarterbacks from week one, I didn't get any points, but I did tell you guys to stay away from DJU, who was in our preseason top 24 for some reason. That's not looking like a very good prediction. But we warned you early after his week 0 performance to stay away from him again this week. He only had 14 points. There were three quarterbacks, or at least three quarterbacks worse than him, so I didn't get any points for that, but I feel good that I tried to steer you guys away from him because he didn't do you much good if you had him in. Willie B, on the other hand, had warned you to stay away from Finley with the matchup that Western Kentucky had against Alabama. He finished second worst with just a couple of points. We think he does have the ability to bounce back this week, but then he was at the bottom of the barrel with Preston Stone and Donovan Smith. But on the best side, I had Salter. He had 22.5 in a normal week. You wouldn't be upset about that at all. I don't think anybody's too upset even this week if they had Salter in their lineup. And Willie B had Jefferson, who ended up with 24.5, which, again, on a regular week, any given week, you'd take 24.5 from your quarterback, but there were so many with 30-plus. They just didn't make it into that top three this week. But, Willie, as far as these three at the bottom, Finley, Preston Stone, and Donovan Smith, who are you staying away from at this point, really, if you had to, for the remainder of the season out of those three? T.J. Finley at Western Kentucky, Stone at SMU, and Donovan Smith at Houston. Are there any red flags there early from the three worst performers from our preseason top 24?
I wouldn't necessarily say red flags. It is what it is when you face Alabama. Obviously,
Right.
no matter who the coach is at this point, I mean, they still have the athletes to get
Right.
it done. But I would say right now the three, I'd have to choose Finley.
As,
I'm pretty sure he's going to stay in that 16 to 20 range, but
right.
we expected him to be a lot higher. But if I had to choose one of the three, I'd say Finley at this
To
point
stay away from?
to stay away from. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to put my you have tornado watches, you have tornado warnings. I'm going to say this is the equivalent of a tornado watch with Preston Stone. I don't at all like what they're doing, throwing a second quarterback in there more often than most people probably would like to see. I think you could call him his backup, but it kind of looks like, a 1A, 1B situation at quarterback there at SMU, where he had 13 points this week and the other quarterback had 20. So I will say, we'll put a quarterback watch out there for the SMU situation. And if you've got him, which actually we do in the Kings Classic, we're keeping a sharp eye out. If that happens again this week, I don't think he's going to be on our roster much longer. I'll just say that.
Well, I'll say this. They won 59-7. So
Okay.
they didn't have to do much. I mean, he was 6 of 9
Mm-hmm.
for 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did what
Okay.
he needed to do. They got the lead. See what else you got. I mean, there's no
Okay.
reason to humiliate a team and put 100 on them. So
All right. Well, I'll take that as a good
you have to
counter
look at it that
argument.
way.
Right. That's good to keep me, feeling a little better about Stone, as one of our Kings Classic QBs. So okay, I'll buy that for now. And like I said, keep a sharp eye out for him here in week 2 coming up, and we'll go from there. Moving to the running backs, this is, I nailed it. I picked the top running back with Gene T. He was in our top 2 for a reason. I went with him. He did what we thought he would do. I also tried to tell you fools about Taylor in Minnesota and not to get too high on him, even if the coaches were indicating or anybody was indicating he might be healthy, because a hamstring is nothing to play with. When it came out that he had tweaked a hamstring in mid-August during fall camp, that's never a good sign, because it's going to last probably through half the season, if I had to guess. That doesn't mean he won't play until the halfway mark, but unless you sit a guy with a bad hamstring or a bad quad for multiple weeks, it's just going to bother him all year long. And I think the coaching staff there did the right thing by sitting him. And luckily, the Big Ten is issuing official injury reports, so you did have a 2-hour notice to get Taylor out of your lineup if you made the mistake of having him in your lineup at any point. So I got points for the best and the worst, the full 3 points. Willie B steered you away from Sherrod from Fresno. He ended up with 5.4 from Michigan. That was a smart move to keep him on the bench. And I would say he did not steer you wrong with Giddens. Giddens was his pick to be the best. He still had 16. I'd say that's a mediocre number, but one that you're not totally disappointed in. He had 13 carries for 124 yards. He just didn't get into the end zone, which would have got him to that over 20 mark that you're looking for. But they played a pretty bad FCS team, and I don't think he saw action for the full game. So that's one of those things that's hard to predict in week one. Wouldn't you say, Willie? These games against the FCS teams are a little bit of a dice roll, anyways.
Right. I mean, another thing at UT Martin, I believe who it was, at the 41-6. Like you said,
Yeah.
you get in the end zone, he's definitely going to be, where you wanted him to be. They have a better game, a better matchup with, I believe it's Tulane this week. So you'll probably see, the true DJ. And yeah, I chose it, and I don't feel bad choosing that for you, and hopefully it worked out.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I don't think 16 is a bad performance. It's just, again, in a weird week where you had so many guys over 25, it doesn't look as good. But 13 for 124 doesn't give you any indication that you should freak out over Giddens. I think even though he's not in our top 16 this week, he's a guy that could return very easily, even after just one more week, here coming up in week two. Moving on to the wide receivers. We got shut out as far as scoring goes, but this is a prime example of, even though we make this into a little bit of a game and we try to score it throughout the season to see how we've been performing, we got 0 points because we didn't pick one of the top three. We didn't pick any of the bottom three. But I chose Concepcion as my top receiver. He got fourth at a hell of a game. Completely satisfied, and like everybody else would be if they had him in the ball game. Willie B had Royals from Utah State with 18.7. So sort of similar to Giddens, but even better, with nearly 20 points. So I think we steered you completely in the right direction there. And the same thing with the worst. Willie B certainly was on the money, assuming that Horton would have a tough outing against Texas. He only ended up with 6.2. I tried to steer you away from Wester, who only had 10.8 and ended up certainly as, maybe the fourth option, maybe the third option, if not the fourth option for Colorado, with Horn and Travis Hunter really stealing the show and stealing the targets there. Now, that doesn't mean if you have Wester, he's not going to perform at all this season. It's going to probably end up what we anticipated when the season we were in the preseason, which is you're just not going to really. That's where he's going to produce for you. But any thoughts on those receivers? Any additional thoughts, Willie?
No, we got close. Like I said, I want to say Horton was like the fourth worst. So I mean, I could have potentially gotten a point there. But all in all, before we segue to making our picks, last year, I barely won. I believe it was 93 points to your 91.
Mm-hmm.
And that's through the whole season. So we got a little bit to pick up, but I still think that we can get there. So we're gonna give you guys some great options of kind of like our version of start and sit. So I feel comfortable with what we did with week one, because it's always just you never know what's going to happen. People really aren't going to show you everything just yet. I mean, there are a few marquee games, but other than that, it's really the cream puff,
Mm-hmm.
the warm up, and so I feel comfortable with what we're going to be giving you as far as options in the next few weeks.
Right, and then so on that note, we'll wrap up kind of the recap here at tight end. Uh, Starting with, I ended up with 3 points for picking the worst tight end, which was Niblack. You know, Maybe got a little too excited in the preseason about what he might do, making the move from Alabama to Texas, replacing Jatavian Sanders. He ended up with only one target, but that was a blowout against Colorado State. But what I think you got a sense of watching Texas is, they've got tons of options, so it's going to be very hard to predict who's going to get the targets there on a week-to-week basis. So, I think I've cooled off a little bit on Niblack and whether or not he can finish as a top 12 wide receiver. I'm not throwing in the towel at all, but in a 52-0 game, they didn't have to play him much. They didn't have to target him much. The one target I think is the fluky side of this, but can he finish as a top 12 receiver? I don't know if I believe that anymore, just because I've realized, how spread out the targets are going to be there. Any thoughts to go along with that, Willie?
Yeah, not really. I mean, Texas is going to be Texas, so I'll just leave it at that. And there are a lot of options here at tight end,
Right.
and
Which we'll get
so
into, yeah. Um,
that's right.
I
Yeah,
had Haas as my best. He had 7.2 with 4 targets at Arkansas. Uh, he started off really fast last year as a true freshman, got hurt. Thought maybe he'd do the same thing. Again, he's not a guy I'm worried about. If you have Haas from Arkansas, I think he's going to be a steady producer on that team. No need to panic just because he didn't finish in the top 12 or top 15 this week. Same thing with Velling, who Willie B had, from now Michigan State, moved over with the Oregon State staff over to Michigan State. He only had 3 targets. In a tougher battle than it should have been against Florida Atlantic, frankly. But he proved too much last year of what he could do, and he's with that same staff that loved to get him the ball. So I wouldn't freak out if you had Velling. I'd say the only mishap here was picking Jolly to be your worst tight end. He ended up with 12.5 after making the move from Connecticut to North Carolina State. So he clearly proved that he belonged in our preseason top 12. That 12.5, I don't think landed him in the top 12 for the week, but I think by doing what he did in week 1, he showed that he's going to be able to make that move, from UConn's level of football to the ACC, and be a big producer there for NC State.
yeah. That was another game that I thought should be more of a blowout. I mean, it was 38-21, so I really
Mm-hmm.
didn't expect him to play, the whole game.
Right,
So, that's just what you take with when week 1. I always say
right.
that.
Yep, exactly. So with that, uh, probably need to move into the top running back options here. Um, for this week, our predictions, I should say, for the best and worst performers at the positions. And we're going to start with running back. So on the screen currently, you can see the top 16 led by the incredible, nearly historic performance by Ashton Jeanty in week 1. Willie texted me during that performance and just said, it looks like Jeanty is just ready to set the effing bar in week 1 for what people are going to be expected to produce. And you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, no, it was just incredible. I mean, it was just an insane performance. It not surprising, but
Right.
I think we have it listed somewhere. I don't think I think the record was what 68 couple years ago, but
Yeah, well, we looked back from the last 3 years, and it was Izzy, the Pittsburgh player. I forget how to say his last name, frankly. But the ended up playing for the Jets. He had 68, 2 years ago. But this is
yeah.
the second best performance we could find from a running back in the last 3 years. Definitely historical, in that sense.
Right. So, we thought, Ollie Gordon may have to run, 50 times for his punishment, even though we knew that wasn't going to be the case. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, Gene T is going to be, one of the top 2 backs, if not number 1. I mean, that's no surprise.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, the bar has been set of, what he's capable of. So
Right. And you mentioned Gordon. We had Jeanty and Gordon 1 and 2, but we did have it reversed with Gordon number 1. He didn't disappoint. He's in there at number 3, kind of finishing or starting off where he finished last year. Maybe one of the bigger surprises is Marquez Cooper sitting there at number 2 with 38.3 points. But if you follow that transition, He's back with his old coach from Kent State when he was kind of tearing it up, for Sean Lewis. And, you wondered, hey, is he going to be utilized in the same way? And it looks like the short-term answer is yes, for Marquez Cooper over at San Diego State, who hasn't really had a go-to running back in the last several years. So I think it's clear now that, they've got one.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
So,
Um, so yes, to kind of speed this up, I know we want to keep this at 110. So
yeah.
let's get to the picks.
Yeah, let's get to the picks. Let's get to the fun stuff. Go ahead, Willie. It's you're going to go first, so you could choose your best or worst prediction to start it off, and then we'll alternate here. And we can, for those again who haven't ever listened or tuned in, we can have the same picks. We don't like to do that. We like to spread it out and give you guys some options, but in some cases it's just too obvious. Who should lead the way or is going to be a failure. But we'll try to stay away from replicating picks if we can.
Yeah. So to give myself a little bit more time, I'm going to go with my worst of the week, and this is only because this the guy is so dominant
Mm-hmm.
and with Genty. So I'm going to go Gaines is my
Mm-hmm.
stay away. They're going to be at Oregon this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. That's actually who I was leaning on, but I want to stick with what I said and also give people options here. And there's another guy that kind of falls into that similar category. Um, we've got two players from the same team. There's two teams that have two players on this list. You've got Boise State with
Mhm.
Gene and Gaines. You've also got Oregon State with Hankerson and Griffin. Um, a lot of these running backs, I think, are here for the long haul. I don't see a lot of flukes on this list. So I think you see a lot of guys that will at least finish in the top 30. I'd say half of this list will probably be here, in the final top 16 or top 24 for sure. Uh, but when I looked at the box score of that Oregon State game, the one thing that stood out to me when I was trying to see if Hankerson or Griffin was, the guy, I noticed that Hankerson had both of his touchdowns in the first half, where Griffin got his in the second half, which tells me a little bit more about the pecking order there. So even though Griffin outscored Hankerson, his teammate, I think Hankerson's still the guy. I've got him in our waiver watch this week. So I'm going to put the X on Griffin against San Diego State. I think they get slowed down just a little bit, and he may not get as many opportunities. I don't think you'll see the split carries like he did last week, and Hankerson might, carry the load a little bit more for him.
Right. Yeah. No, no, I like that, and I think we had that little bit of that conversation during the waiver watch. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So kind of moving right along. These top guys. There's going to be. I think there's like three or four that we feel like are going to be staying in that position. But I'm going to
Yep.
go with the guy. He's my RB4,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, from the preseason, and I'm going to go RJ Harvey against Sam Houston.
Mm-hmm. All
I
right.
just like what their offense is going to be capable of, and he had 28,
Yep.
and I just think that this kid, he can ball. So
Yeah, and you're one of the few. Well, yeah. I didn't see a lot of people in the preseason. I'll put it this way: there were a lot of people that were more concerned that Penny Boone had transferred in. KJ Jefferson is now the quarterback. How are those touchdowns going to be divided now? Because those are big guys that could steal touchdowns. But you were one of the few, I'd say, that really didn't get scared of that and stuck with Harvey as far as, believing in him and drafting him in several leagues, all the way to the end there.
yeah, no,
So,
I just think that the proof is in the pudding, and you know Boone's he's been a couple different places. He's going to get his, but RJ, he's just too explosive, especially even in their pass game. So feel
mhm.
comfortable with making him this selection, especially early in the season.
Yeah. Uh, well, to me, this week's pick, if you look beyond Ginty, who's playing Oregon, uh, I thought, I actually saw his name and who he's playing and thought this week's pick for the best was an easy choice for me, and that's Jonah Coleman from Washington. If you saw him running this weekend, the announcers were kind of using that term they use for Pacheco, talking about how he was running angry. He just looks like he loves to play football and stood out as possibly the best player on the field for Washington and their opponent this week. So I love what's going on there. We talked about the fact that he's there with his old staff, from Arizona. They believe in him. They know what he's capable of. They brought him in for a reason. He came, with them for a reason, and that's to be the man. And his 34.6 might get beat this week against Eastern Michigan, is what I'm going to say. I feel very confident in that. A couple other guys. I think this, Anthony Tyus from Ohio, there was a lot of free agent bucks spent on him this week, and I think for good reason. A lot of people had Hunt penciled in as the starter there, but, I saw one guy refer to him as looking like a Conan Barbarian for Ohio, so I got to go take a look at him physically, see if that matches up. But, I think he's due for another big one also. What do you think GT will do against Oregon? Let's just get some predictions here on the record from you and I. Let's put a point value here on him. I'll put the pressure on you to go first since I asked the question for GT against Oregon.
All right, so point value, I'd probably say, let's give him the modest the Jalen White number. Let's just give him the 21.
21. All
Yeah.
right.
So now that still puts him at 40, and he'd still be number one depending on what these other guys in the top five do. So
yeah, I think that's very reasonable. I had 22 or 23 in my mind, so I'm going to go 22 and a half for GT. I can see him getting his 100 yards. I can see him getting a touchdown. There's 16 points. So throwing a couple catches and yardage there. I'm going to go 22 and a half. You're going 21. So there it is. You want to now move it on to the wide receivers, or have any final running backs you want to point out here?
No, we're good. I mean, I want to say, I thought about, Jonah Coleman was my second choice, but
Okay.
I still think Terrion Stewart is just a thumper. Obviously, they're playing Penn State. That's why I kind of steered away from him a little bit. But there's not going to be a whole lot of movement here on this list, other than we said that there's a couple of duo guys, but
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But
I like Stewart a lot also, but he was my second choice, or I guess I would say third. I had Sire, Gaines, Griffin, and probably Stewart as my three to choose from for worst game, but only because they're playing Penn State,
right.
who I give a lot of they're one of my teams that I think could make it to the Final Four potentially as a surprise Final Four pick this year, even though I'm not hoping for that as a Rutgers fan.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So let's move it along.
Let's move it on. And as we look at the wide receivers, we get to basically give you the same speech that we gave you about the running backs, which is Tet McMillan just, blowing the door off here with 64.6 points and another, he had 300 yards, right? Receiving, Willie?
Let's see. He held a hell of a game. That's for sure. Let's see. He had
actually, I know. Yeah, it was 10 catches for 300 plus.
Yeah,
I remember
304.
thinking,
yeah, 304.
I didn't get to see all of the game. One of those late night games that you woke up to if you didn't stay up and just saw the outcome. And I think I was most amazed that he got the 300 yards on only 10 catches. That's what stood out to me. That's pretty amazing. And then I saw some of the highlights, and there were certain plays where he was so wide open, like he looked like the way the Olympic sprinters look when they're winning their initial heats. How they slow down like 10 or 15 yards before they even cross the finish line. Like there were plays where he just jogged into the end zone because he was that far ahead of the defenders. So pretty amazing performance there. And again,
Yeah. So when we talk
yeah,
about Conan type guys, this is that Conan type. I mean, 6'5", 212. I mean, obviously, a man playing amongst boys is what it looked like. So
yeah, and we mentioned the running back performance being the second best in 3 years. This is the best wide receiver performance in the last 3 years. I'd guess, probably a top five performance in the last 10 years. But we've only had 360 plus games in the 2 years prior. In 22 and 23, there were 360 plus games. We now have had two already in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see, if they can match the 2 year previous total this season alone. Damon Ward at number two was a guy that a few of the CFF analysts were really hyping up, including myself. I think we pointed out that there were like 160 targets that North Texas was going to have to replace, and it seemed very clear that Damon Ward was going to get the bulk of those, and that wasn't wrong. So it's a surprise to some, but not to all. If you were listening in the offseason, that Damon Ward is sitting where he is. Good to see Nick Nash, a guy who's kind of been up and down over the last couple of years there. Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn, both in the top 16. A little bit of rapid fire here. Will both of those guys manage to stay, not necessarily in the top 16, but you think Colorado finishes with two guys in the top 24, Willie? Will this be consistent?
ooh, it'll probably be consistent for the first few games. Obviously, there's an agenda at place.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get a Heisman and all of that. It's really going to come down to what happens when they face Baylor, UCF, and then K State. Uh, so if they kind of turn around and then they're what let's say they end up being 3-3, and then we head into the Arizona and the Cincinnati games, then we'll know for sure. We'll know if the offensive line can keep Shadur healthy enough,
Yep.
if their defense is actually any good, or are they still having to score 50 to win.
I
So
hear you.
that'll be the determination, and what that's going to do is that if the defense can't hold up, then that's going to force Travis to struggle a little bit.
Right, right. Um, Looking around, Ty Felton at number five is another name that we tried to tell you about. It's another team
Yep.
that lost quite a few targets. Felton and Prater, who is wide receiver two this week for them, and had 6 catches for 60 yards. It's another team that might have multiple players, kind of pop in and out of this top 16 all year. But that one was just another one that seemed very clear and obvious that they lost a lot of targets, but there were some very good, obvious guys sitting, there waiting to take over. And Felton, you know, made it pretty clear he's going to be the target for Maryland. And they had a quarterback battle going on, which maybe kept some people away from taking those wide receivers. But Billy Edwards seemed to be much improved in the passing game, which he didn't get to do a lot of when he'd come in as a backup last year. But you could see why it was a battle with him and MJ Morris, who transferred there from NC State, and why he won the job. Probably only one big surprise here. A lot of the names we're all familiar with, but we just put, before we make our picks, point out Pena from Syracuse with 32.7, being Kyle McCord's number one target. Frankly, I don't know a lot about the kid. He wasn't on my radar before the season started, but he's another guy now that people are spending a lot of free agent bucks on. Willie, did you know anything about him before? And, do you have any thoughts on him now? The guy from Syracuse, Pena?
No, he wasn't necessarily on my radar, and neither was McCune for UTSA, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, as far as like, coming out and being
Dominating. Yeah.
target heavy. Yeah,
You're right.
yeah, just being target heavy. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, we've already talked about a few guys at the top who had, double digit targets. Um, Devin, had what, 13, I believe. So between those two guys, those are my surprises. And then even Tez being, I mean, he had 32.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it more so reflects when we get to the quarterback situation. Um, with Gabriel having the game he had, he only had 20 points, and then Tez ends up with 32.
Mm-hmm.
When Gabriel's numbers thrive, I think Tez obviously will also, and that's kind of scary considering he had 32. So it makes me, it will, it's going to vault him into this top five.
Yeah, let's go back to that on the Gabriel. It was a very interesting point outcome versus Gabriel's stat line. Let's talk about that when we get there. But
Yeah.
for now, I guess I've got a tough choice here of who will be the best receiver of the week from the current top 16. And I think I will go with Damon Ward from North Texas because I absolutely know his results were not a fluke. I don't think he will get the 47 again, but I could see another, 28 to 30 point game from Damon Ward. Um, there's a lot of reasons you can see why he did what he did in terms of those targets. He's helping replace. So he's going to be my guy. I don't think he drifts too far out of the top five much this season.
Wow. Okay.
There you
Yep.
go.
I can see. Yep. I can see that.
We're
Okay.
making
So
definitive statements this year on this show.
only because of the matchups at the top. And like I said, this kid, well, it's not kid. This man amongst boys,
Mm-hmm.
he's just incredible. So I gotta go Tet, and they're Northern Arizona. Most likely, probably only play a half, but his half of football is probably going to be just as good as everyone else's full game.
Yeah,
So
if you cut his numbers in half, he's going to get 32 points. That's not bad.
that's right.
That could lead a given week. So we'll
Exactly.
see.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So what 150 yards and two scores basically if you cut it in half.
Yeah, yeah, and only 5 or 6 catches. Poor thing.
Right. Right.
All right. So now we're looking as far as worst. Uh, I hadn't thought quite as much about this one. Um, the matchups are getting tougher for a few teams. Like as the games will get better. I think just because of the traditional way they've played or how they've been good traditionally, Air Force, slows the game down as John Lobb mentioned in our waiver watch. You don't get nearly as many opportunities with the ball. Um, it's still a young quarterback at San Jose State who I do think is worth rostering there, but I think Nick Nash sees a little bit of a decline this week. So I'll give Nick Nash the X. But I think most on this list will still have a pretty good outing. I just think his will be the worst. But I could still see him getting 18, 19 points, but
Yeah.
that won't cut it.
Yeah. So I come in the opposite on him, but like I said, I understand it is Air Force, and like you said, it's a time situation. How many
Mm-hmm.
opportunities is he going to get? So I agree with that. But I'm going to go with Travion Rudolph, NIU. They have to go to South Bend. Going to be a little bit tougher,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't foresee them, scoring more than let's say 21.
Right.
So I'll take Travion as far as my steer clear this week.
All right. Well, there you have it. There's the receivers. Um, any final comments? Anybody on the list that you didn't mention that want to note?
No, I mean, everybody, obviously, you're deserving. I mean, you put up 30 points, you're deserving to be where you are. And it's just a matter of, can your offense help you sustain that? I think most of these teams here, they're going to be a little bit pass happy. So, I think that they're going to probably fluctuate in between where they are now and then the 20 range, since we are doing 16. So I feel comfortable at least in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Barring injury. Hopefully that did not happen to any of these guys. We want them healthy. But no, I like the list as it shapes, and most of these guys should probably stay where they are.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, we'll move on to the tight end zone. And moving to this list, this is uh, the list that really makes you question, how much you know about college football and the players playing the game, because there were like 5 guys on this list that I had never even heard of before week 1 finished. Um, until we were really going through the tight ends that finished in the top 12. I can honestly sit here and without any shame say I didn't know who Connor Vaughn was at Tulsa. I didn't know Dorian Fleming at Georgia State. I didn't know DeCirio Riles at ECU. I didn't even know Mitchell at Pitt because I'm still thinking Bartholomew is going to be the top tight end at Pitt.
Mm,
So there's quite a few guys here that were new to me. And we look at this all off season and quite a bit more than most people. So I'm sure they're new
right.
to a lot of people. But, for that same reason, we're here to kind of give you our advice on whether we think they'll stick around. And, maybe that's a good point, a good place to start before we jump into the predictions is, looking at a guy like, Riles at ECU. He had 3 catches for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns, which puts him at the number 5 spot. I don't know that I believe a guy with only 3 catches and 2 touchdowns is going to have the staying power, to be honest.
Right. Right.
That touchdown efficiency can't possibly hold up. He's not going to have 24 touchdowns this year. We know that. It's probably likely he may not even get 10 or 12 touchdowns. So, a guy like Riles, congratulations to him for the 20 points he earned. But, I'm not ready to say he's the real deal yet. I'm not going out and spending my free agent bucks on a guy with only 3 catches, even if he did have 2 touchdowns. What do you think, Willie?
No, I tend to agree with that. I mean, you look at Casey Kelly, his running mate there at tight end. He had
Mm-hmm.
3 for 35 and a touch. So, you
Right.
know, which one of those is really 1 and 2 as far as being the starter? They played Norfolk, won 42-3. I mean, it is what it is. When it's a blowout like that. So
Yeah.
that's
And,
more so. More so, I like all the targets. Amongst the whole team. So we'll see what happens. But yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I don't see him staying, in the top 10, let alone on the list. So
Right. And another guy that's, in my opinion, in that category here is just because you're not going to be sure who to go with is Cole Mitchell from Pittsburgh. He actually had more targets than Riles, so there may be kind of more legitimate claim that he'll stick around and have more big games throughout the season. But Bartholomew did have 5 catches for 66 yards. He just didn't get the touchdown. So, he's competing with another guy on the team that's been around. He's a veteran. Yes, he's disappointed as far as the fantasy production. But he's still there, and he's going to be taking catches away from that guy and targets away from Mitchell. So I don't necessarily think Mitchell's a guy that's going to stick around either. I think out of the 3 I mentioned, Fleming from Georgia State, might have the legs, to remain here. But he's going to be one I keep an eye on because, like Willis last year for Middle Tennessee, I didn't know anything about him. So he had 4 for 60 and 1 touchdown, enough for 16 points in the number 12 spot. But I just wanted to touch on those types of guys for you guys listening to let you know that, there is some fool's gold out here. And some of the more traditional names, will be bouncing back, like the Vellings, like the Haases that we picked, to do good last week. It's not that they did horrible; they just kind of had those mediocre games. But I think you see some of those guys kind of pop back into this room, by the end of the season. But with that said, Willie, it's your turn to go first. So, do you want to pick your best or worst tight end for the week?
uh, I'll probably go best. But let me add 2 more names. We're going to talk about Fanning. We
Yep.
talked about Jolly a little bit
Oh
earlier.
yeah, yeah,
Those are
yeah,
going to be the names that you see come back up to toward the top. I was just happy to see that we had 14 tight ends that scored over 15 points. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's a blessing. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
it's the tight end gold rush.
yeah.
And let's not move on first too. Also, without just congratulating Keithy on his return from injury. He's
Hmm.
only played 2 games in the last 2 seasons, I think. And when we last saw him at full strength, this is what we knew he was capable of. And there may not be another better tight end, all year long. We know from history if he can stay healthy, his performance this week was not a fluke, and they will be going to him as often as they can. So he may not get 28 every week, but he is the rare tight end that might get you 15 to 20 kind of week in and week out as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, no, yeah,
So
I
there you
agree
go.
with that. Yeah.
All right. So now, Willie, who do you got for best or worst tight end for week 2
Hmm.
from this group of
Well,
12?
yeah, I like the two guys. Obviously, I like the two guys at the top. I really don't want to just you know choose that,
Right, right.
but
It is.
sometimes you just have to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna go with a guy. He's never really healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but glad to see that he is, and so we're gonna give him one more chance, and I'm gonna go Rondé Gatson.
Okay. I I thought you were going another place and we're going to steal my picks. But yeah, it's great to see Gatson, bounce back, from a slowed down 2023 from injury. You also had to wonder, was the coaching staff going to use him in the same way and at the same frequency that the old staff used him? And the answer seems to be yes. So that was nice to see. I agree. Um, I had a weird feeling when you said when he's healthy, he's good. I thought you were going to go Caden Prescorn, which is the way I'm going to go. Um,
Oh, okay.
I heard a ton of praise, in both camps, fall and spring, about Prescorn's development, the strength he had gained, how he had adapted fully to kind of the SEC level of competition. Um, and this week just kind of showed us how he's going to be utilized within that Ole Miss offense, and I think he's definitely a name that is going to be back where he was 2 years ago when he was playing at Memphis. I think he's going to be able to replicate that type of a season now with Ole Miss. So I'll go out on a limb. We will keep the top two obvious picks there at the number 1 and 2 spots off of our picks. Those are safe picks. I think we both agree, right, with Keithy and Beck. But
Yes.
we want to be a
Yeah.
little bit more risky and not give you the obvious, so you can have some other names to throw into the mix or your lineups.
Well, and
So
then Beck against Long Island. I'm not even sure how long they'll play.
yeah,
So that's the
exactly.
reason why I stayed away from that.
Yep, I agree. I was right over by that campus the other day. I have no idea where that team plays football, though. It's all right. Go ahead with your worst pick.
Okay, so I'm gonna say this 17.4 is a little bit fraudulent. He had two targets, both were touchdowns. He had 34 receiving yards, and that's Connor Vaughn from
Yep.
Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it is Arkansas State, can you count on every target you get to be a touchdown? I don't believe so.
Yep. And
So,
that was the one that I missed. I knew there was a name I missed when I was kind of, going into that, line of thinking when we started with the tight ends. And I actually see now in my notes I had him circled, but since you took him, I'll stick with the guy that I kind of railed on to open up. And so you heard it all when we opened the segment on the tight ends. I'll go Riles from ECU. Same logic. I don't think every one of your catches can always be a touchdown. He's not finishing with 24 catches and 24 touchdowns for the season. So I think Riles, kind of gets brought back down to earth this week against Old Dominion, and I'll leave it at that. So,
all right,
um, and we
nothing wrong
mentioned
with
the
it.
waiver wire in the future. Keep an eye on Claire for Purdue. He's got a early buy. I wished he was there to take in the waiver watch this week. For the long haul, if he's available in your league, go grab Claire from Purdue. He is definitely another name that I see staying on this list kind of week in and week out, if you guys can grab him. And that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, wanted to double check and make sure. Okay, we're good.
All right. We will move
Last
on
group.
and finish with the quarterbacks. Looking at the QBs, we had quite a performance from Mr. Devin Dampier, who is not going to be participating this week after having a week 0 game and a week 1 game. turning out to be one of the best dual threat options in all of college football. So just wait until he gets into his conference play, and you can probably expect, very similar outcomes for the rest of the season. He's got some of his tougher games early on, but, once he gets into conference play, hold on to Dampier if you've got him. Mateer seems to be running the Washington State offense the exact way it's supposed to be running. Willie, let's go on. Let's do this for fun as we go down this list a little bit with the quarterbacks. Jackson Dart last year was notorious and consistent for having a really good week followed by a really bad week, literally, and you guys can go look
Yep.
at it, literally every single week of last year. He would have a 30-something point game followed by a game in the single digits or the teens, a high 20-point game, another, like a 12-point game after that. Will Jackson Dart have another game at least over 20 points this week against Middle Tennessee State?
Well, I have him in our home league, so I hope so, but
All right. Don't sound too
so
confident.
like Coach Herm says, what is it? A hope without a plan is a wish. So
Right.
I don't game plan, so it's just a wish at this point. I
All right.
don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll probably see
Under
probably.
20, you're
I'm
saying.
gonna say 17.
All right. I'm going to say over 20 for Jackson Dart. I think he proves that he's a better quarterback and a more consistent quarterback. He will not play down to the level of competition against Middle Tennessee. You will actually see multiple games over 22 points by Jackson Dart. He may not get close to his 45, but I think he gets half of that, and it gets about 22 and a half points this week at Ole Miss, which is an improvement based on what he did last year when he literally was up and down all year long. So, that said, anybody else jump off the screen here as far as just names, to keep an eye on in general for the remainder of the season, or anybody that doesn't belong and you're just shocked is here and won't be here for long?
Shocked.
Ethan Hampton, I guess, from NIU. Do we know much about Ethan Hampton and if he's going to be the real deal from Northern Illinois? I don't know who he is. I don't know what he does. I'm not afraid to admit those things.
I was able to pick him up, and I think I want to say I have this matchup a little off, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I do. Let me double check real quick on that. Yeah, let's go ahead and change this matchup now. So we know that this matchup is actually not New Mexico, it's Notre Dame. So that's
Okay.
that's gonna knock him down a little bit. So, and I expect that we get a guy like a Dylan Gabriel who is not on this list because of his incredible performance. So,
Yeah.
so correcting that, so Ethan Hampton probably will not stay here because I think he'll be under that 30 mark.
Right.
And it doesn't mean he can't bounce back later on. But this Notre Dame matchup is going to be too tough to keep him on the list, I think, for next week.
Right. Yeah. And I'm looking at the list now. Yeah, I think a lot of the guys here will be in the top 25 to 30 at least all year long. I don't see another name here that I would question being able to finish in the top 30. Maybe the other surprise name is Peyton Thorne, but he looked greatly improved. He's got a lot more weapons around him. I don't think it's the Peyton Thorne, from Michigan State anymore. It's the improved Peyton Thorne who's at Auburn and is going to be, a 25 plus, game guy most of the season. He's probably the guy on the list that has the least chance of staying in the top 16 from this group, in my opinion. But I do think he's still a top 25 or top 30 quarterback, when all is said and done, based on the early improvement that we saw in week one. A name that is a kind of an I told you so here is Jalen Milroe. We knew with that Washington staff going to Alabama, he was going to be throwing the ball more, which was going to lead to more production. And we know what kind of an athlete he is, and he didn't disappoint. I think you see some even bigger games than this from Milroe. I think he was a top 5 QB for us in the preseason, maybe number 6 where he is right now. But there really aren't any other surprises here. You got the North Texas QB at number 4. Maybe Taylon Green is a surprise to some. You didn't know quite how Arkansas's offense was going to shake out, and he looked like a man out there. We talk about, the Conan Barbarians on the field. Taylon Green looked like a giant at quarterback, a lot bigger than he seems to have been at Boise State, and super athletic, just like we saw it at Boise State. So that, I think, yeah, maybe he's one of the surprise guys, but certainly looked like he belongs, and wasn't a fluke in my opinion. So with that, uh, I'm going first with quarterbacks for best and worst.
Yeah, I believe you're going first. And so why are you thinking about that? I will say this, that if Aguiar
Mm-hmm.
goes up to Clemson, and I know that they don't have the defense that Georgia does, but if he goes up to Clemson and handles
Mm,
their business, you can expect a lot of kids to be jumping ship. And Clemson, I don't know what will happen with their season if they end up losing to App State.
right, right. Yeah, I agree. And on that note, yeah, I think he's going to have a decent game against Clemson. I think I picked Aguiar up in 7 of the 9 leagues I'm in because people were just sleeping on him that much. Nobody disagreed that he was going to be a good quarterback, but
Hmm.
we actually felt like he was going to be a great quarterback. We had him in our,
Right.
I think, around 12 to 15, somewhere in that range, and I think he was one of the most slept on quarterbacks in the preseason. Um, but I'll jump into the picks real quick. You talked about him. We know that he's playing Notre Dame. Um, it's not a knock against the kid, but he's got a really tough matchup. I don't think Ethan Hampton's going to be able to come close to this number this week. And because everybody else on this list has a pretty favorable matchup, I got to go with Ethan Hampton. And I wouldn't even be mad if you put your X on the same guy, Willie.
Okay. Yeah. So and let's not slight Aguiar. We actually had him seventh.
Yeah, there
So
we go. We had him at the top
we're
10.
real, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So we're real high on him. So
yep, exactly. All right. So what do you got,
um,
Willie? You're gonna go with Hampton also, which again I can't knock you if you do. We do try to spread it out, but he is a pretty obvious pick here with some other. It'd be tough to pick somebody else as a worst pick. But are you going
yeah.
to go
I
on a
mean,
limb?
no, I mean, I don't feel like I can go on a limb, to be honest. I mean, looking at these other teams that are playing, we have some really decent quarterbacks on the list.
Yep.
No, I would probably have to say I'd be crazy. I mean, it's a competition. Like I said, it was 93 to 91 last year, so can't just give up points, especially when I'm down 9-4. So
Right.
I'd have
Right.
to say Ethan.
All right, that's fair. I can't blame you on that one. No need to spread it out and sacrifice points when they do all count, and it is a
Hmm.
competition still. Um, I will say as best performance. This is the tougher one here because there are a lot of good options. I
Hmm.
love the Texas Tech Washington State matchup as one of those that could be, a 42 to 45 type game. It's just which quarterback do I want from that game? Uh, I picked Baron Morton in my waiver watch, and he was
Hmm.
shockingly rostered on less than 30% of the teams. And I think I'm going to stick with him. I think I'm going to go Texas Tech QB Baron Morton um, to outperform John Mateer in the Texas Tech Washington State game, even playing on the road. I know that was a big factor in why John Laub was willing to not go with Morton, but I don't think it bothers him. I think Texas Tech, you know, barely wins in a shootout there. Um, and you can't go wrong with either quarterback, Morton or Mateer, in that Washington State Texas Tech game.
Yeah. Well, I like Gio Lopez. I like Mateer, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Morris, they got Stephen F. Austin. Don't know how long he's going to play. So I'm going to
Right.
go with the guy you talked about, and then we're going to go Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I, I just like what obviously what that staff does. He just seems like the perfect quarterback to run what they want to run.
Yep.
So
There's
I
another
think he's
factor
going to
there
have
too.
a good outing.
There's another reason to feel good about Milrow this week. if everyone thinks back to last year, I think they barely beat South Florida and were a little bit embarrassed. I think they got by like 9-0. It,
Oh,
it
okay.
was they were pretty embarrassed when they went down to and played South Florida and barely beat them last year. So I think Alabama is going to be ready, to kick a little ass, and let
Okay.
those guys know it was that outcome was a fluke. So they gotta redeem themselves a little bit, because even though they did win the game, they barely won that game last year at South Florida. So
17-3.
17-3, yeah. So and it
Yeah.
was like 9-0 at the half, or in the deep in the third quarter, something like that. So if I'm not mistaken, but yeah,
Yeah.
Milrow,
Yep.
yeah, you absolutely can't go wrong. I think that entire right column, Mateer, Chandler Morris, Milrow, Green, Sanders, Morton, and Fafita all look good. Maybe Rising was one of the ones I was considering to have a little, bit less of a performance this week. Again, maybe kind of in the 18 to 20 range. I wouldn't be surprised, if Rising gets past at that number 16 spot, at least for this week. He could bounce back, but that'd be another one I might stay away from if you're choosing between him and another of the players on this list, if you happen to have two on your roster. But any final thoughts on the quarterbacks or anything else, Willie B?
It's, uh, don't count out Sanders early.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Green. He. This is going to be an interesting game against Oklahoma State. So
Yeah.
just will both teams sit and try to just run the ball? So I mean that
Mm-hmm.
could be the situation there. Will the game just go? Will the clock just continually run, and then he doesn't? Either side doesn't get their passing yards like they should. So that's the
Yep.
only thing that steered me clear of Taylor this week.
Yeah, that's one of the more fun games. One of the really good matchups over the weekend. Going to be tuning into that. I think I've said all I need to say this week, so I just want to wish everybody good luck. We're looking to go 2-0 in the Kings Classic. We will always keep you guys updated on that as part of our full
Hmm.
disclosure, to keep us in check and how we're doing on the year. Willie B,
Yep.
final thoughts?
Yep. That's it. Thank you for watching and listening, and good luck this week.
All right, there it is.